Something extraordinary happened in ancient temples across the world that modern archaeology can't fully explain. Initiates would enter as ordinary people and emerge completely transformed, claiming they had remembered who they truly were before birth. Here's what's fascinating. Cultures separated by thousands of miles and centuries. Egyptian mystery schools, Indian ashrams, Greek Orphic temples, all described the same phenomenon. They spoke of souls experiencing a kind of cosmic amnesia upon entering physical form, not as punishment, but as a temporary forgetting of our divine nature. The Egyptians called it vibrational descent, consciousness lowering its frequency to inhabit matter. Sanskrit texts described samsara, the cycle of spiritual forgetfulness. Greek Orphics viewed the soul as temporarily veiled by physical existence. But here's where it gets intriguing. None of these traditions wrote down their core technique. The knowledge passed orally from master to student because attempting it unprepared could entrench the ego deeper into illusion. What exactly happened in those ancient chambers? What technique could instantly reconnect souls with their true identity? The answer lies in understanding how Thoth taught initiates to pierce through the veil of forgetting. When Thoth spoke of the barriers that separate us from our true nature, he didn't start with cosmic forces or mystical obstacles. He started with something far more intimate and insidious, the false identity we carry around like a second skin, never questioning whether it actually belongs to us. This isn't about evil spirits or demonic possession. It's about something much more subtle and pervasive. Every day, you wake up and immediately slip into a character you've been playing for so long that you've forgotten it's just a role. This character has opinions, fears, limitations, and dreams that feel completely authentic to you. But here's what Thoth understood that most people never realize. Almost none of these thoughts and beliefs actually originated from your authentic self. Think about the voice in your head right now, the one that's probably analyzing these words, maybe agreeing or disagreeing, forming judgments. Where did that voice learn to speak? What language is it using? Whose phrases does it repeat when it gets angry or excited? That voice you consider to be you is actually a composite of every authority figure, parent, teacher, friend, and media influence you've encountered since birth. Let me give you some specific examples of how this programming gets installed. Maybe you heard, "You're too sensitive" when you cried as a child, or "Stop being so dramatic" when you expressed excitement. Perhaps it was, "You're not good at math" after struggling with one concept, or "You need to toughen up" when you showed vulnerability. These weren't observations about your true nature. They were other people's discomfort with their own sensitivity, their own mathematical struggles, their own fear of appearing weak. But your developing mind absorbed these statements as fundamental truths about who you are. They became the foundation stones of your identity. You started making decisions based on these borrowed beliefs, choosing paths that would avoid triggering them, or conversely, trying desperately to prove them wrong. Either way, you were still letting someone else's limitations define the boundaries of your existence. Thoth called this the invisible mental prison. We don't see the bars because we've been living inside them for so long that we mistake the walls for the entire world. We think the thoughts that arise in our minds are our authentic voice speaking, when in reality, most of them are just old recordings playing on repeat. Here's a practical exercise that demonstrates this principle immediately. For the next few minutes, observe any thought that arises in your mind and ask yourself, is this thought really mine, or did someone put it in me? You'll be shocked to discover how many of your daily thoughts are actually inherited rather than created by your authentic self. When you think, "I should be more productive," whose voice is that, really? When you feel guilty for resting, who taught you that rest was laziness? When you criticize your appearance in the mirror, whose standards are you applying? Most of the thoughts that control your daily decisions came from somewhere else entirely. This recognition creates profound discomfort, and that's exactly what Thoth warned would happen. The false self doesn't want to be discovered because its entire existence depends on remaining invisible. It will fight to survive, convincing you that these protective beliefs are necessary, that letting them go would be dangerous, that you need them to function in the world. It's like wearing a mask for decades and then trying to take it off. Your face feels strange and exposed at first. The air hits your skin differently. You might even feel naked or vulnerable without the familiar weight of that mask. But gradually, you remember what it feels like to breathe freely again, to express naturally. This is why Thoth insisted that this cleansing must happen before seeking any mystical experiences or advanced spiritual practices. If you plant seeds of truth in soil that's still full of lies, the ego will find a way to distort any revelation to serve its own interests. It will turn spiritual freedom into spiritual pride, turn insight into vanity, turn knowledge into competition. The false self is incredibly clever at co-opting even genuine spiritual experiences to reinforce its own importance. I've seen this happen countless times. Someone has a profound meditation experience or mystical insight, but instead of dissolving their ego, it actually strengthens it. They become the person who gets it while others don't. They start collecting spiritual experiences like trophies. They use their insights as weapons to feel superior to those who haven't had similar experiences. This is the false self wearing spiritual clothing, and it's often more dangerous than obvious ego because it's so much harder to recognize. The liberation that comes from this initial recognition is unlike anything else. Suddenly, silences become comfortable instead of scary because you're not constantly running mental commentary. The desperate need to prove yourself to others begins to dissolve because you realize most of your insecurities were never yours to begin with. You stop taking certain thoughts so seriously because you recognize them as old programs running automatically. But this process requires tremendous gentleness with yourself. You're not trying to violently rip away these false beliefs or attack them directly. That approach usually just strengthens their grip. Instead, you're gradually increasing your awareness of them, learning to recognize when they're operating, and slowly creating space between your authentic self and these inherited patterns. One technique that's particularly effective is what I call the belief archaeology method. Take any limiting belief you notice about yourself and trace it backwards. When did you first remember thinking this about yourself? Who was present when that belief formed? What were the circumstances? Often, you'll discover that what feels like a core truth about your identity actually formed during a single conversation or incident when you were young and impressionable. Another powerful approach is to notice the difference between thoughts that arise spontaneously from your authentic nature and thoughts that feel forced or repetitive. Authentic thoughts tend to have a quality of freshness and aliveness to them. They emerge naturally in response to present circumstances. Programmed thoughts feel stale, repetitive, and often completely disconnected from what's actually happening in the moment. As this clearing process continues, something remarkable begins to happen. In the spaces where old programming used to operate automatically, something deeper starts to emerge. It's subtle at first, maybe just moments of unusual clarity or peace, or sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere. This is your authentic nature beginning to breathe again, starting to remember itself. The key is to approach this work with curiosity rather than judgment, with patience rather than force. You're not trying to destroy anything, just becoming aware of what's actually yours and what you've been carrying for others. This is just the beginning. Once you've started to clear away the false identity that's been running your life, you create space for something far more profound to emerge. But that's exactly where we're headed next, into the deeper layers of remembering who you really are beneath all the programming. As that carefully constructed false identity begins to crack and dissolve, something extraordinary starts to emerge from beneath all the mental chatter and borrowed beliefs. It's not another thought or emotion. It's an entirely different way of perceiving reality that's been there all along, waiting patiently beneath the noise. Thoth called this the single eye, not the physical eyes that scan the external world, and certainly not the analytical mind that constantly judges and categorizes everything it encounters. This is direct perception in its purest form, unfiltered by the stories we tell ourselves about what we're experiencing. Think about how you were trained to understand the world. From your earliest memories, teachers, parents, and society insisted that real understanding comes through analysis. Break things down into parts, compare this to that, calculate the benefits and risks, judge whether something is good or bad, useful or useless, beautiful or ugly. We learn to approach every moment of life like a math problem that needed solving. But here's what nobody told you. Truth doesn't reveal itself through comparison or calculation. It emerges through presence itself. The single eye operates on a completely different frequency. When it begins to function, you'll notice something remarkable. It doesn't rush to name what it sees. It doesn't immediately sort experiences into familiar categories or wrap them in comfortable stories. It simply witnesses what is, without the compulsive need to explain or justify the experience. This might sound passive, but it's actually the most dynamic form of perception possible. When you're not busy labeling and judging every sensation, emotion, or thought that arises, you gain access to a dimension of reality that most people have completely lost touch with. In this space, everything is already whole, already complete, needing nothing added or taken away. Let me guide you through a direct experience of this right now. Put aside whatever you're doing for just a moment and settle into genuine stillness. Not the kind of waiting where you're expecting something dramatic to happen, but the deeper stillness where you're not waiting for anything at all. Close your eyes if that feels natural, or simply soften your gaze. Notice that beneath all the thoughts commenting on this exercise, beneath any resistance or anticipation, there's a quality of awareness that's simply present. It's not thinking about being present, it just is. Stay here for 30 seconds or so. Don't try to make anything special happen. If thoughts arise, that's fine. If you notice sounds around you, that's fine too. The key is recognizing that something in you is aware of thoughts, aware of sounds, aware of the entire field of experience without being disturbed by any of it. Even if nothing particularly dramatic seemed to occur during that brief pause, something significant just happened. You created space for pure perception to function without interference. That spaciousness, that quality of awareness that can observe without immediately reacting, that's the single eye beginning to open. This direct perception is profound, but it's important to understand that it's only the beginning of what Thoth's technique reveals. The single eye shows you that something exists beyond the constant chatter of mind and the roller coaster of emotions. It proves that you're not just your thoughts and feelings, but there's still something more intimate, more essentially you, waiting to be discovered. The unique vibrational signature that defines who you really are at the deepest level. As you practice engaging this direct perception, something beautiful starts to happen. Life begins revealing another layer entirely, something your physical eyes can't detect. You start sensing that everything around you, people, plants, objects, even empty space, you simply begin to perceive it directly. You've actually touched this perception before, probably more often than you realize. Remember those moments when everything seemed to fall into perfect place without any effort on your part? When you had a strong intuition about someone or something that turned out to be completely accurate, even though you had no logical reason for knowing. Those times when deep certainty arose from nowhere, accompanied not by anxiety or doubt, but by a profound sense of rightness. That was the single eye functioning naturally. Or think about those rare instances when you were in nature, maybe watching a sunset, or sitting by water, or walking through old trees, and suddenly, the boundary between you and what you were observing seemed to dissolve. For a few moments, there was no separation, no observer and observed, just pure experiencing itself. No thoughts about how beautiful it was, or how you should remember this moment. Just direct, unmediated contact with reality. These glimpses aren't accidents or random neurological events. They're your natural perceptual capacity breaking through the layers of conditioning that normally keep it suppressed. The single eye has always been there, waiting for the mental noise to quiet down enough for it to function clearly. What's fascinating is how this perception strengthens with practice. The more you recognize these moments of direct seeing, the more available they become. You start noticing that you can access this way of perceiving even in ordinary situations, while talking with someone, while working, while dealing with challenges that used to trigger automatic reactions. This isn't about becoming some kind of enlightened being who floats above normal human experience. It's about returning to a natural capacity that was never truly lost, only temporarily obscured by years of conditioning that taught you to trust analysis over direct knowing. But even this profound shift in perception is just preparing the ground for something far more extraordinary. Because once the single eye stabilizes and you can reliably access direct perception, you become capable of detecting something even more subtle, more intimate, more essentially you than anything we've explored so far. There's a unique vibrational frequency that belongs to you alone, your soul's authentic signature in this vast field of consciousness. And when you finally attune to that frequency, everything changes in ways that will completely redefine what you thought was possible for human experience. The single eye shows you that you're not your thoughts and emotions, but your soul's true frequency reveals who you actually are. You know how when you were a child, someone would call your name from across a crowded room, and somehow, through all the noise and chaos, you'd hear it? That specific sound would cut through everything else because it belonged to you. What Thoth understood, and what most spiritual teachings completely miss, is that your soul has something similar, but it's not a name in any conventional sense. He called it the invisible name, and it's probably the most misunderstood concept in all of ancient wisdom. When people hear invisible name, they immediately start thinking about secret words or magical incantations. They imagine there's some hidden syllable they need to discover, some mystical password that unlocks their true nature. That's exactly backwards. Your invisible name isn't a word at all. It's a frequency, a vibrational state that's been resonating within you since before you took your first breath. Think of it like this. Every soul carries its own unique tuning fork, and when that fork is struck, everything inside you recognizes the sound. Not your mind, not your personality, but something much deeper. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and where that single eye perception we talked about becomes crucial. This frequency can't be learned from books. You can't find it through meditation techniques or spiritual formulas. You can't download it from a guru or inherit it from a tradition. It's accessed through vibrational resonance, which means you have to become still enough, quiet enough, open enough for it to emerge naturally. Most of us have actually heard echoes of this vibration before, but we didn't recognize what it was. Remember those rare moments when everything just clicked? When you were walking in nature and suddenly felt this inexplicable sense of coming home? Or when you were facing a difficult decision and this deep knowing arose, not from thinking or analyzing, but from somewhere in your chest that said yes or no with absolute certainty? That wasn't intuition in the way most people understand it. That was your invisible name beginning to sound. The challenge is that our minds are incredibly noisy. We've got decades of conditioning, constant mental chatter, emotional reactivity, and what Thoth would call the ego's endless commentary, drowning out this subtle vibration. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a construction zone. The whisper is always there, but the noise makes it impossible to detect. This is why the direct perception work is so essential. When you start seeing through the false identity, when you begin operating from that single eye awareness, the mental noise naturally begins to settle. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you're no longer feeding it with your attention and belief. And here's something that will probably challenge everything you think you know about spiritual awakening. This vibration transcends all words and concepts. The moment you try to capture it mentally, to understand it or explain it, you've already moved away from it. It belongs to essence, not mind. The more you try to mentalize it, the less you can actually feel it. This creates a fascinating paradox. Your thinking mind wants to grasp this, to make sense of it, to turn it into knowledge it can possess and control. But the invisible name can only be felt, never understood. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. When this vibration does become clear, and for some people it happens gradually, for others in sudden moments of recognition, something extraordinary occurs. There's this silent certainty that arises in your chest, not arrogance, not spiritual pride, not the ego inflating itself with newfound importance, just this unshakable peace that doesn't depend on anything external. It's the deep knowing that says, I know who I am, and I don't need the world to confirm it. You stop looking for validation in other people's opinions. You stop measuring your worth through achievements or relationships or spiritual experiences. There's just this quiet confidence that needs nothing from outside itself. But here's what Thoth warned about, and why so many people get confused or frightened when they start accessing this frequency. True light doesn't choose what to illuminate. When your inner light begins shining, it shows you everything, including all the hidden wounds, the old fears, the buried aspects of yourself you've been trying to avoid. This is where many people want to turn back. They think awakening should feel blissful all the time, that finding your true nature means everything becomes easy and pleasant. But authentic transformation requires facing what you've been hiding from. The light reveals everything that's been blocking your freedom, and some of that stuff isn't pretty. Your ego, that false identity system we explored earlier, doesn't just disappear quietly. When confronted with this deeper truth, it often fights back. It might try to co-opt the experience, turning it into spiritual vanity, or making you feel special and superior to others. It might create doubt, making you question whether what you're experiencing is real. Or it might try to complicate something that's actually beautifully simple. Thoth observed that not everyone who crosses this threshold returns transformed. Some people touch this deeper vibration and then come back confused or fragmented because they weren't ready to let die what they thought they were. They wanted the expansion without the dissolution, the light without the shadow work, the awakening without the ego death. Because that's what this really is, a kind of death. Not physical death, but the death of the character you've been playing without even realizing it. The death of all the roles and identities you constructed to please others or protect yourself from fear. The death of everything false. True initiation into your invisible name doesn't make you more important, it makes you more real. And being real in a world full of pretense, in a culture that rewards performance over authenticity, can feel incredibly vulnerable at first. But here's what I want you to understand deeply. This frequency, this invisible name, is already sounding within you right now. You don't need to achieve it or earn it or become worthy of it. You need to become quiet enough to hear what's always been there, singing the song of who you really are. When you first glimpse your true essence through the single eye, when you begin to sense the unique frequency of your invisible name, something profound happens that catches most people completely off guard. The soul doesn't just gently whisper hello and integrate seamlessly into your conscious life. Instead, it triggers what Thoth called the Great Purification. And honestly, nobody warns you how intense this process actually becomes. Here's what actually happens. Remembering who you really are isn't just about recognizing your divine nature and floating off into blissful enlightenment. The moment your authentic self starts awakening, every single thing you've built to survive in this world suddenly gets exposed under a harsh spotlight. All those coping mechanisms, defense patterns, and survival strategies that seemed so necessary, they start crumbling, and it can feel like your entire identity is dissolving. Thoth understood this phenomenon deeply. He taught that purification isn't some form of spiritual punishment or divine judgment. It's as natural as water washing dirt away when it finally finds its source. When you begin remembering your true nature, everything that isn't authentically you has to surface so it can finally be released. The problem is, we've been carrying most of this stuff unconsciously for so long that we don't even realize how much we've accumulated. Think about old traumas that you thought you'd processed years ago. Suddenly they're back, not because you're regressing or failing spiritually, but because your soul is finally strong enough to actually heal them at the root level. Those deep fears you've carried your whole life without ever understanding where they came from, now their true source becomes crystal clear, often revealing patterns that go back to early childhood, or even seem to transcend this lifetime entirely. But here's where it gets really uncomfortable. All those fundamental lies you've been telling yourself start losing their power. You know the ones I'm talking about. I'm not good enough. I have to please everyone to be loved. I must protect myself at all costs, because the world is dangerous. I need to be perfect to be worthy. These beliefs that have literally shaped your entire personality suddenly feel hollow and foreign, like trying to wear clothes that belong to someone else. The light of your essential nature starts shining into every dark corner of your inner world, and initially, this feels absolutely terrible. Seeing truth can be painful, especially when you realize how much of your life you've spent running from yourself. You start noticing all the masks you've been wearing, recognizing how you've been trapped in belief systems that were never actually yours to begin with. Family conditioning, cultural programming, religious doctrine that never quite fit, it all becomes visible simultaneously. I remember Thoth's most crucial insight about this phase. The suffering only continues as long as you resist what's surfacing. The moment you stop fighting the purification process and actually embrace what's coming up, everything transforms into genuine healing. True purification isn't about pushing away the bad parts of yourself. It's about integrating everything you've been trying to deny or hide from yourself. This is where something remarkable happens. At this crucial turning point, your soul begins taking the lead for the first time in your conscious adult life. The mind, which has always been setting the rules and making the decisions, suddenly steps aside. The ego, which has been controlling every step through fear and desire, goes surprisingly quiet. In that unexpected silence, your true consciousness finally has space to emerge. But don't think this transition happens smoothly. There's a real test here that most people fail the first few times they encounter it. Remembering who you are is actually just the beginning. You have to keep walking this path, because your mind will absolutely try to regain control. It will pull you back toward comfort zones, old habits, and familiar stories about yourself. If you give in to this pull, you'll return to the forgetting. But here's the thing. Once your soul has tasted freedom, it doesn't want to go back to sleep. So you find yourself in this strange in-between space where you're no longer unconscious, but not yet fully awakened. Your perception starts shifting in ways that are hard to describe to people who haven't experienced it. Instead of your mind analyzing and trying to control everything that happens, consciousness begins observing without constantly interfering. This creates what Thoth called the waking trance. You're completely present and engaged with life, yet somehow distant enough that you don't get swallowed by the chaos surrounding you. Time seems to slow down during this phase. Each moment feels deeper and more substantial. Emotions still arise, but they don't control you the way they used to. Intuitive insights start flowing effortlessly, often answering questions before you've even fully formed them. Decisions become clearer because you're no longer filtering everything through layers of fear and conditioning. Situations that used to completely throw you off balance now seem relatively small compared to the vastness of what you're discovering about your own being. It's like standing in the center of a storm while watching everything from within an unshakable silence. The world keeps spinning around you. People continue rushing from one drama to another. The noise and chaos remain exactly the same, but inside you there's this profound peace. Not because anything external has changed, but because you've fundamentally shifted how you perceive and relate to everything. The most beautiful part of this purification is realizing that everything you thought was wrong with you was actually just covering up something magnificent. Every wound becomes a doorway to deeper compassion. Every fear transforms into wisdom about what truly matters. Every false belief that falls away reveals more of your authentic power. This is why the purification phase, despite its intensity, is actually the most important part of remembering who you are. Without it, spiritual awakening remains just another concept in your head, instead of becoming a lived reality that transforms everything. Now comes the real test. You've touched that deeper frequency, felt the truth of who you really are beneath all the conditioning. The purification process has shown you what needed healing. But here's where most people stumble. They think awakening means running away from the world, sitting on a mountaintop somewhere, avoiding the chaos of everyday life. Thoth understood something profound. The true alchemist doesn't hide from the world. They walk through crowded streets without losing themselves in the noise. They sit in traffic jams and maintain their inner compass. They have difficult conversations with family members without getting pulled into old patterns of reactivity. This isn't about becoming some detached, emotionless being. It's about developing what I call conscious presence, the ability to stay awake while everyone around you is sleepwalking through their lives. Think about it this way. You're now operating on a different frequency than most people. You've remembered something essential about yourself, but you still have to navigate a world full of people who are running on autopilot, reacting to everything, getting swept away by every news cycle and social media trend. The secret isn't isolation. It's conscious choice in every moment. Let me share 3 specific practices that Thoth encoded in the Hermetic texts, though you have to read between the lines to find them. First is what he called active silence. This isn't about being quiet or avoiding conversation. It's about maintaining a part of yourself that stays observing, stays centered, no matter what's happening around you. When your coworker is complaining for the 20th time about the same problem they refuse to solve, part of you can listen with compassion, while another part remains untouched by their drama. When you're stuck in a meeting that feels pointless, you can participate fully while maintaining that inner sanctuary where your true self resides. I practice this constantly. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, part of me is completely present with these ideas, and another part is aware of the birds outside, the feeling of my feet on the ground, that deeper stillness that's always available when we remember to access it. The second practice is vigilance over mental input. Here's something most people don't realize. Everything you consume with your eyes, ears, and attention shapes your vibrational frequency. Everything. Your mind is like a garden. If you don't consciously choose what to plant there, weeds grow everywhere. Empty information, collective fears, other people's anxieties, and unconscious patterns, they all take root without your permission. Before you know it, you feel exhausted, scattered, lost in thoughts that aren't even yours. This doesn't mean becoming paranoid or cutting yourself off from information. It means becoming selective, conscious, asking yourself, is this input raising my frequency or lowering it? Is this conversation feeding my soul or draining my energy? Am I choosing this thought pattern, or is it choosing me? I'll give you a practical example. I used to scroll through news feeds every morning, absorbing story after story of conflict, crisis, and chaos. I told myself I was staying informed, but what I was really doing was programming my nervous system for anxiety before my day even began. Now I choose specific times to engage with information that's actually relevant to my life and work. The rest of the time, I feed my mind with things that elevate my consciousness. Books that challenge me to grow, conversations with people who inspire me, experiences in nature that remind me of the bigger picture. The third practice is what Thoth called return to source. This isn't about going back to some past version of yourself. It's about returning home to a place that has no physical location but is closer than any destination you could travel to. It's where the seeking ends, because you realize what you've been searching for your entire life was never lost. You just forgot where to look. When you establish this connection to your source, something fundamental shifts. You stop needing to chase other people's approval because you remember your inherent worth. You stop seeking answers outside yourself because you recognize the wisdom that's always been within. You stop begging for love because you realize you are love, not in some abstract, spiritual way, but in the most practical, lived sense. This becomes your anchor point. When the world gets chaotic, and it will, you have somewhere to return. When people try to pull you into their drama, you can offer compassion without losing yourself. When old patterns try to reassert themselves, you have a reference point for what's real and what's just conditioning. But let's be honest about the challenges. Your family members might not understand why you're not getting upset about the same things that used to trigger you. Your co-workers might find it strange that you're not participating in the complaining sessions anymore. Some friends might feel threatened by your growing clarity because it highlights their own unconscious patterns. This is where compassion becomes crucial. These people aren't your enemies. They're you from a few months or years ago. They're doing the best they can with their current level of awareness. Your job isn't to wake them up or fix them. Your job is to maintain your own frequency while treating them with kindness. I've learned to see unconscious behavior as a kind of suffering. When someone is reactive, controlling, or negative, they're usually in pain. They've forgotten who they really are, just like you did before you started this journey. You can offer understanding without getting pulled back into their world. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply maintain your presence. People feel it, even if they can't name it. Your calm in the middle of their storm becomes a reminder that another way of being is possible. The beautiful thing about living from this awakened state is that it's not a destination, it's a way of being. Every moment offers you the choice. Will I react from my conditioning or respond from my consciousness? Will I operate from fear or from love? Will I let external circumstances dictate my internal state, or will I remember who I really am? This remembering becomes the foundation of everything else. Your work becomes more meaningful because you're bringing consciousness to it. Your relationships become more authentic because you're showing up as your true self. Even mundane activities like washing dishes or driving to the store become opportunities to practice presence. The goal isn't to become perfect or to never have challenging emotions. The goal is to stay awake through whatever life brings, knowing that beneath all the surface turbulence, your essential nature remains untouched, whole, and free. Picture this: deep within the limestone chambers of ancient Egyptian temples, Initiates lay motionless on stone slabs for hours, their breathing so shallow that observers might mistake them for dead. But something extraordinary was happening in those sacred spaces, something that would forever change how these individuals understood reality itself. These weren't theatrical performances or religious ceremonies designed to impress crowds. The temple mysteries represented humanity's most sophisticated technology for consciousness exploration, developed over thousands of years by masters who understood that the greatest prison isn't built of bars and walls, but of mistaken identity. The process they called symbolic death had nothing to do with physical dying. Instead, it involved something far more terrifying to anyone trapped in ego identification: the complete dissolution of everything you think you are. Initiates were guided into states so profound that consciousness would literally separate from bodily awareness for extended periods, sometimes lasting entire nights. But here's what made these experiences radically different from anything we might recognize today. There were no teachers standing over these initiates, delivering lectures or explanations. Instead, the guidance came through pure vibration, specific frequencies that resonated through the temple chambers, along with geometric symbols that seemed to communicate directly with something deeper than the thinking mind. The priests understood a secret that modern education has completely forgotten. No one can teach you who you truly are. You can only remember what you've temporarily forgotten. Every initiate already possessed this knowledge, buried beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and social programming. The ego's constant chatter, its endless stream of worries, ambitions, regrets, and plans, had simply grown so loud that the quiet voice of authentic knowing could no longer be heard. During those crossing hours, something remarkable happened. Initiates would begin recognizing symbols they'd never studied, understanding principles no one had taught them, feeling truths that bypassed intellectual comprehension entirely. They weren't learning new information. They were awakening from what felt like a long, heavy dream to remember who they'd always been. This wasn't some pleasant, philosophical insight. We're talking about spiritual reality shock. Once you've seen beyond the veil of ordinary perception, you can't pretend you didn't. The illusions of separation, the fears about survival, the desperate need to control outcomes, all of it loses meaning when you experience your true nature directly. But not everyone could complete the crossing. The temple records speak of initiates who, when faced with their own vastness, felt overwhelmed by fear. Egos that suddenly realized they weren't the center of everything sometimes fought back desperately. Some people got stuck between worlds, unable to fully return to their previous illusions, but not yet ready to live from their soul's truth. The courage required was immense. You had to be willing to surrender everything you thought you knew about yourself, including your problems, your story, your carefully constructed identity. Many turned back at this threshold. So how do we adapt these ancient techniques for modern practitioners? The fundamental principles remain the same, even if we're not lying on stone slabs in Egyptian temples. The practice of conscious dying begins with learning to lie completely still, while allowing your awareness to gradually separate from identification with the physical body. You remain alert and purposeful, but the normal boundaries of self start dissolving. This isn't about falling asleep or spacing out. It's about maintaining consciousness while releasing attachment to bodily sensations, thoughts, and emotions. Start with 20-minute sessions. Lie flat, arms at your sides, and begin by consciously relaxing every muscle group. But instead of trying to feel more relaxed, imagine that you're gently stepping back from the body entirely, as if you're slowly backing away from a house you've been living in. The house remains, but you're no longer confined within its walls. Vibrational listening requires developing sensitivity to frequencies most people never notice. Sit quietly and tune into the subtle sounds within your own head, not thoughts, but the actual vibrations that seem to emanate from different areas of your skull and chest. With practice, you'll discover that certain frequencies guide you toward truth, while others lead toward confusion. Trust what you feel, not what you think about what you feel. The method of symbolic recognition involves allowing images and symbols to arise spontaneously during deep meditation, without immediately trying to interpret them mentally. Your rational mind will want to categorize and analyze everything, but the real communication happens at a level deeper than thought. Keep a journal nearby and sketch whatever appears, even if it seems meaningless. Patterns will emerge over time. But here's the crucial preparation that most people skip. You must clear away false beliefs about spirituality itself. If you're seeking these experiences to become more special, more powerful, or more enlightened than others, you'll hit a wall every time. The ego can't use these techniques to enhance itself because the techniques are specifically designed to dissolve ego identification. Emotional stability matters enormously. If you're dealing with unresolved trauma, severe depression, or active addiction, work with qualified professionals first. These practices can intensify whatever's already present in your psyche. Most importantly, cultivate genuine surrender rather than spiritual ambition. True initiation doesn't make you more important, it makes you more real. There's a profound difference. Never attempt these practices under the influence of any substances. Your nervous system needs to be completely clear to navigate these states safely. Ensure you have supportive people in your life who understand what you're exploring. If you start feeling ungrounded for extended periods or having difficulty distinguishing between inner experiences and external reality, seek guidance immediately. The real challenge isn't having these experiences, it's integrating them into ordinary life. You might have profound realizations during meditation, but can you maintain that awareness while stuck in traffic or dealing with difficult co-workers? The ancient initiates knew that mystical experiences mean nothing unless they transform how you live moment to moment. These techniques aren't goals in themselves, they're tools for remembering who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. The real work happens when you close your eyes after meditation and choose to live from that remembered place, bringing awakened consciousness into every mundane moment of your beautifully ordinary human life. If you've made it this far, something profound has already shifted inside you. This isn't coincidence, it's recognition, your soul calling to itself across the veil of forgetfulness that modern life has wrapped around your authentic nature. The ancient Egyptians understood this moment. They called it the Great Remembering, when the Ka recognizes itself in the mirror of truth. But here's what the temple initiates discovered that most spiritual seekers miss today. Awakening isn't a destination you reach and then coast. It's a way of being that requires constant cultivation, like tending a sacred flame. The moment you think you've arrived, you've already started falling back asleep. This is why Thoth's teachings emphasize the eternal return, not as repetitive cycles, but as deepening spirals of consciousness. The real challenge begins now. You've tasted what it feels like to remember who you are beneath the conditioning. Your soul doesn't want to return to that cramped, artificial existence. But life has a way of pulling us back into old patterns. Work demands, family expectations, social pressures. They all conspire to make you forget what you've glimpsed. This is where most people lose their way. Integration is everything. Awakened consciousness isn't meant to be a peak experience you remember fondly while living an unconscious life. It's meant to transform how you show up in relationships, how you approach your work, how you make decisions, how you move through each ordinary moment. This doesn't mean becoming a different person. It means finally being the person you've always been, beneath the layers of protection and performance. Watch what happens when you start making decisions from inner knowing rather than external pressure. That job that drains your life force but pays well. Your awakened self knows it's a trap, even when everyone around you calls it responsible. That relationship where you constantly diminish yourself to keep peace. Your authentic nature recognizes the poison even when society tells you to compromise. The awakened person learns to trust these inner signals over the noise of collective opinion. Speaking truth becomes non-negotiable, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Not truth as attack or judgment, but truth as authentic expression. When someone asks how you're doing, you stop automatically saying fine when you're struggling. When a conversation turns to meaningless gossip, you either redirect it or gracefully exit. When someone crosses your boundaries, you address it directly rather than seething silently. This isn't about being difficult, it's about honoring the life force that flows through you. Your relationships will shift dramatically. Some people will be drawn to the authenticity they sense in you, even if they can't name it. Others will feel threatened by your refusal to play the old games of mutual deception and validation seeking. The awakened person doesn't judge those who are still sleeping, but they also don't pretend to be asleep to make others comfortable. You become a living example of what's possible, not through preaching but through presence. This creates a delicate dance with family members, colleagues, and friends who may still be operating from unconscious patterns. You learn to speak their language when necessary, while maintaining your inner truth. You offer support without trying to fix or change them. You understand that everyone awakens in their own time and way, and that pushing spiritual insights on unreceptive people often creates resistance rather than openness. Here's a crucial distinction. Awakening doesn't mean becoming passive or detached from life. That's a common misconception that keeps people spiritually bypassing their real responsibilities. True awakening increases your engagement with life, but from presence rather than reactivity. You feel emotions more fully but aren't controlled by them. You care deeply about outcomes while releasing attachment to specific results. You work diligently toward goals while remaining flexible about the path. The ego doesn't disappear in awakening. It becomes a tool rather than your master. You'll notice old patterns trying to resurface during stress or challenge. The difference is speed of recognition. Where you might have been lost in a reactive pattern for days or weeks before, now you catch it within hours or minutes. You develop what the mystics called the witness, a part of consciousness that observes your own mental and emotional processes without being swept away by them. Daily practices become essential anchors, not elaborate rituals, but simple moments of return. Conscious breathing while stuck in traffic, brief periods of inner silence before important conversations. Regular check-ins with yourself. Am I operating from fear or love right now? Am I responding or reacting? What does my deepest wisdom know about this situation? These micro moments of awareness compound into a transformed life. Gratitude becomes a gateway back to presence. Not forced positivity, but genuine appreciation for the mystery of existence itself. The fact that you're conscious in a universe of seemingly unconscious matter. The intricate dance of your nervous system. The way sunlight feels on your skin. These aren't small things. They're miracles hiding in plain sight. The awakened person learns to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Your relationship with work transforms. Whether you're in a traditional job or running your own business, you start asking different questions. How can I serve something greater than my personal desires through this role? How can I bring more consciousness to these tasks? How can I use whatever sphere of influence I have to contribute to healing and evolution? The answers might surprise you. Sometimes the most profound service happens through simple presence and authentic relating rather than grand gestures. The ripple effect of awakened living is real but subtle. One person living authentically gives others unconscious permission to do the same. Consciousness spreads not through preaching but through example. You become a permission slip for others to drop their masks, to speak their truth, to honor their inner knowing. This happens naturally, without effort or intention to influence. But awakening also brings responsibility. The increased awareness and freedom you've gained isn't meant just for personal comfort. It's meant to be shared, to serve, to contribute to the collective evolution of consciousness on this planet. This doesn't mean you need to become a teacher or healer in the conventional sense. It means using whatever gifts and opportunities you have in service of something larger than your individual desires. The ancient initiates understood that this path requires ongoing commitment and vigilance. There's no graduation from consciousness work. Each day offers new opportunities to choose awareness over unconsciousness, love over fear, presence over reactivity. Some days you'll feel aligned and clear. Other days you'll feel lost and confused. Both are part of the journey. What matters is the overall trajectory, the gradual deepening of your capacity to remain present, authentic, and loving, regardless of external circumstances. This is what Thoth meant by the eternal return. Not endless repetition, but endless deepening. Each spiral of experience offers new opportunities to embody what you've learned more fully. The forbidden technique ultimately isn't about techniques at all. It's about coming home to yourself, stripping away the false identities and protective strategies that once served you but now limit you. Remembering that beneath all the conditioning and confusion, you are consciousness itself, temporarily housed in human form, here to experience and express the divine through everyday life. The journey of remembering who you truly are is both ancient and immediate, both universal and deeply personal. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood."